The people of this disaster-stricken city are starting to assess and comprehend the extent of the damage of a blast that was far more destructive than any explosion Lebanon has ever seen. Just before sunset on Tuesday, highly explosive material stored at a warehouse at Beirut port caused the blast, sending shockwaves across a city now in ruins. Almost every building has been damaged. Many are dead. Thousands are injured and hundreds are missing. Rescue workers work through the night and into the morning as people and bodies were feared trapped underneath the rubble.
My husband is an employee at the electricity company. He survived, but his colleagues didn't. They're only now removing their bodies from under the rubble.
This is a country already reeling from a dire economic crisis, where 50% of the population live below the poverty line. Its people are not in a position to cope with this disaster.
Material losses are sad, but it's nothing compared to those who lost their lives. This is my taxi, it's my livelihood, and I'm still paying for it.
Everyone has a story of survival or tragedy. The damage spread several kilometers. Many are blaming those in power for the catastrophe.
This was Lebanon's Hiroshima. We trusted them with our money, our souls, our lives, and they betrayed us. Why are they still in power? They should all resign. We only have God now. Their day will come.
Authorities are appealing for help from the international community. The state is close to bankruptcy.
It's like a big earthquake hit Lebanon and Beirut. This will cost billions of dollars to restore. The economy will get even worse because businesses have been hit entirely. In order for it to relaunch, it needs new investments. We will not despair.
Some countries have started to send much-needed medical supplies. The healthcare system was already close to collapse. Hospitals have been laying off staff in recent months because of the financial crisis.
We are an afflicted hospital. There is no hospital, as you can see. The hospital is closed, and now we wait for our directors in order to receive instructions, because we want to start the recovery. Workers cannot get in the hospital, as you can see, because it's unsafe. The ceiling is falling down. It is a critical situation.
Lebanon's leaders are promising an investigation to determine who was responsible for storing ammonium nitrate without safety measures at the port for years.
We are determined to investigate and reveal what happened as soon as possible and bring those responsible to justice and punish them accordingly. We will transparently announce the results of these investigations.
But those who hold power are being blamed for negligence, incompetence, and corruption. People are in shock, but anger is also growing at a political class many blame for mismanagement and being responsible for running the economy into the ground. Months of protests calling for a new leadership have been met by a militarized state, and demands by the international community to fight corruption, especially at Beirut port, in order to be eligible for financial aid, have gone unheard. What many call a man-made disaster is the latest crisis to hit a country already on its knees. So much has been lost when there was already so little.
Let's cross over to Zeina, Khodr, correspondent in Beirut. I mean, Zeina, you're not just one of our senior Middle East correspondents, and you know the region so very well, but this is your home city, and you are as shocked, most probably, as anybody else about what's gone on behind you in the last 24 hours.
No doubt. Behind me is Beirut port, or what is left of Beirut port. You can see the scale of the damage. This was a massive, massive explosion. Shockwaves were felt across the city. I was a few kilometers from here walking in the street when I heard a thud. I thought it was a mock air raid because Israeli warplanes have been flying frequently, violating Lebanese airspace as of late. But then I saw smoke, and the shockwave pushed us to the ground. Glass everywhere, panic, chaos. This country hasn't been immune, really, to political violence and to assassination. So the first thing that came to our minds that this is yet another political assassination. And then reports emerged that some sort of an accident happened at a Beirut port. But people here are refusing to call it an accident. They're calling it a man-made disaster. They're blaming the authorities for this. Hundreds of people remain missing, many of them port employees, people who were working at Beirut port when that explosion went off. Their families are hoping that they will be found alive, but as you can see, it's going to be very, very difficult even to find the remains of people. There was a fire. It began with a fire at one of the warehouses, and firefighters were called in. And as they were trying to put out the flames, the fire spread to the warehouse where that ammonium nitrate was stored, and that caused the blast. So horrific scenes. We've been driving across the city this morning. Almost every building is damaged, and 300,000 people are now made homeless.
Indeed, and of course, both the President and the Prime Minister have been speaking within the last few hours. And this is poignant because people hear the politicians speak the speak, but they don't walk the walk. And if they don't walk the walk this time, they want them walking out of office.
Well, a lot of people are angry. It's not just shock. There is anger. They believe that there is negligence, incompetence, and corruption. They're asking questions. What was all this ammonium nitrate doing at a warehouse? Especially that reports are emerging that the authorities were well aware of the presence of this highly explosive material. Many have lost faith in the leaders and the leadership. Yes, this is a relatively new government, new faces, but they were appointed by the same political parties who have been governing this country for decades, the same parties who have been accused of running the economy into the ground. This is why it's going to be very, very difficult for the people to cope, because already 50% of the population live below the poverty line. 32% of the workforce lost their jobs. Businesses have been closing down. There's a shortage in foreign currency. People's savings are trapped in banks. There are informal capital controls in place. There's a scarcity of dollars. The lira, the local currency, has devalued by 80%. And then you have a healthcare system which is collapsing. So people do not have faith in those in power. They believe they will not carry out a proper and independent investigation. In fact, already voices are calling for an independent international investigation to find out exactly what happened. A blast, really, that ruined a whole city.
And indeed, the search and rescue operation, as you say, continues. But the hospitals and the medical staff really under strain.
Yes, the hospitals are under strain. The healthcare system was already collapsing before this blast. Private hospitals were already firing employees. The biggest hospital, the American University of Beirut Hospital, they fired 850 nurses and administrators just a few weeks ago because they could no longer pay them. Why? Because people are losing their jobs. When they lose their jobs, they lose private insurance, and they no longer can go to hospitals. And it's not just that. The cash-strapped government owes private hospitals billions of dollars. And then you have the public hospitals, which are underfunded. They've been neglected for decades. And so they are struggling. And that's why politicians have been calling on countries to send medical assistance. And some countries are answering that call. You mentioned earlier Qatar sending a field hospital. Other countries are going to follow suit. But those who oppose the government, critics of the government, are appealing to international donors not to provide aid to the government directly. They're saying give the money, give help to the people directly or through NGOs, because I can tell you people have lost a lot of faith with those who are holding power.
Zeina Khodr in Beirut, thanks for the update. So, as we heard, Beirut's governor has said that the disaster could cost Lebanon in excess of around about $3 billion. And it couldn't have come at a worse time. As Zeina mentioned, the economy has been unravelling during months of anti-government protests over allegations of corruption and mismanagement. In March, Lebanon defaulted on $90 billion worth of debt. Talks with the International Monetary Fund on a bailout stalled last month after infighting between the government and its central bank. The Lebanese currency, which remains pegged to the dollar, has lost 80% of its value since October. That's been devastating for a country that imports most of its goods. Food costs are up 190% on the year, and salaries and savings have lost much of their value, while the fallout from the pandemic, COVID-19, has sent poverty and unemployment soaring. Jad Jaban is an economist specialising in health, education and labour policies. He says the economic situation is so dire it could be treated as a humanitarian issue.
We have direct costs and indirect costs. You know, the direct costs are to repair the physical infrastructure, the private property losses, the public property losses. And also you have indirect costs, because this is a huge interruption to what was left of livelihoods, of people's income, people who lost their bread earners and their main income, earners. and the Beirut port, which is now out of service for a long time. The international community should view the Lebanese citizens now as economic refugees in a stateless country, because this state, ruled by thugs, has committed another act of war on its people with this massive explosion that is a deliberate act of more than negligence. This is not an accident. This was stored for more than a decade there. Everybody knew it was there, from the top of the government till the simplest employee on the port. Everyone knew this dangerous equipment and chemicals were there. The Lebanese people need help. We need help right now, and any delay in help will even exacerbate the economic consequences of this. And this help can be channeled through humanitarian support directly with the agencies that are on the ground. I don't think, frankly, we have any other option. Even if we're paid some compensation money to rebuild, it will be paid in Lebanese pounds, which are worth a sixth of their value. And we still need to import a lot of the raw material, the glass, the aluminum, every reconstruction material possible. And from the initial assessment, 80% of Beirut has been damaged from the blast. So this is a huge humanitarian operation, and it should be treated as such.